Okay.
So we're going to have a general chat.
We're going to have a general chat, but
Yeah.
I think what you've been making these videos about Europe and
Yes.
with great passion and rather a lot of brilliance actually.
It's kept simple. The key with the videos has been to keep them really, really simple and
What
very factual.
Yeah, and what I particularly like is that you've not touched on the migration issue, which I think isn't relevant.
I didn't want to talk about migration because I think that's too easy.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest, I think that's yeah. We all know that it has a burden on services. That's obvious.
Yeah.
So we don't need to talk about that. We can focus on some of the other.
My own thought is that actually whether we're in or out of Europe, the migration issue needs to be solved separately.
Yes.
And maybe at the moment Cameron and people are solving it in Turkey, but I have my suspicions because I think Turkey has its own agenda.
I think with the Turkey thing, that's something that the British people aren't really fully aware of yet. So they know that, for a few people aware that something's going to happen in October this year, but what they're not aware of is probably from those meetings Turkey will join the EU in 2020.
Yeah, almost certainly.
I don't think anything will stop that. I think that's inevitable.
In fact, if we were to leave Europe, I think Turkey's accession would be speeded up.
I think they would have to speed it up, to be honest. Yes, I do.
I mean, there's a number of countries that actually, I think should be part of the EU because the EU has done a positive job in some senses in pulling countries together and pulling countries socially into a better position.
There's, I'm a great fan. I know you are. We understand a little bit about history and how important Europe is, and the reasons. Primarily, I think why Europe kind of became this united, I'll call it a state, but a united group of countries bringing together is obviously you have America and you have Russia and you have China. Europe has to kind of try to grow together, and I understand that logic.
Maybe, but the biggest logic is the idea that we don't want a third world war, which is centred once again in Europe.
Yeah.
But I would maintain that we've never had a second world war. The second world war is just a continuation of the First World War. So. But anyway, sorry.
That's all right.
But look, you see, this is where it's the idea that Europe can actually do some good. I think we both agree that even if whether we're in or out, at the present moment, Europe is failing as an institution.
It collectively at the moment, the biggest problem has always been that it has different interest rates. You have different currencies. Even if you try and push everybody into the euro. The problem is all the countries bring in their own baggage already, and not all the baggage is necessarily monetary. It can be other issues that existed in the past.
But there's also Europe is increasingly revealing as time goes by that there isn't parity between countries, whatever that baggage may be.
Big parity, and obviously the problem with that is as you think about Europe, if you have a country joining and they have, shall we say, not necessarily such a good social system in place. Naturally, they're going to want to come to other areas in Europe that have a better social service system.
Well, that's yes, but I think if you forget the idea of free movement of peoples, even if the people are remaining in the same place, the quality of life in Greece or in Romania is completely different to the quality of life in Germany or England.
Yeah, very, very much so.
And there hasn't been much effort made to equalise things, and in that sense, the European project doesn't seem to be working. Maybe it should be given more time.
I wonder how much time it would actually need. I think one of the problems is how many years would it need? I mean, I think all it will do is lurch from crisis to crisis. I think this is the problem. It's just such a big bag that all we're going to see is, even if England stays in, the truth of it is we're just a matter of a year or two from another disaster.
Crisis.
Would another European country fail? Bundesbank is in trouble.
If we look down to Greece, they are within another 6 months of a major crisis.
I believe so, and I think Spain's been
and socially, I mean, the stuff I'm seeing in the Greek press is the word Grexit again.
Yeah.
So we're focused on Brexit.
Yeah.
They're increasingly focused on Grexit again.
I mean, Britain.
And they're horrified that they're part of the Schengen Treaty and they're being treated as if they're not. And that seems to me to be not a political question but a moral question. It's the moral question which I'm increasingly more interested in Europe.
I think it's quite sad that the centre, the history of where I say politics stems from, has been literally destroyed and become its own little protectorate. That's all it is now. We just look after it. Poor Greece. I think that's incredibly
But
sad.
you say poor Greece. Now, if we were to leave, if we were to follow your initiative,
Yeah.
as you think we should, and you make an incredibly convincing argument, and I follow all the points, I agree with so many of them.
Yeah.
Poor Greece has no one to help it.
It does, because Britain isn't going to leave any country behind, is it? I mean, you become a statesman. When you leave, others will follow. Other countries who've demanded a referendum have been refused it up to this point.
Mm-hmm.
Britain needs to show the way out, and then by showing the way out, actually we're in more control, not only of our finances, but we're also in more control of helping other countries out of their issues. Because ultimately, this is what trade is all about. This is how you help other countries out. Greece has got things that she can do, I'm absolutely certain, that we are going to need to do with her. Well, there's nothing better than negotiating those deals separately away from a block of countries that control you. And that's really all it is, it's control. I mean, there are so many more countries out there that we should all be trading with. That includes Greece, that includes Southern Ireland. Southern Ireland, I know personally, I've got family out there, how they've suffered at the hands of the EU.
Well,
Half of it is political.
If you look at it, the Irish problem economically was worse than the Greek problem, wasn't it?
It
or
was.
at least as bad.
It was, and
they just dealt with it
we
differently.
can't blame it all on the EU, because a lot of it is bad. I would say it's bad government, to be perfectly honest with you, in Southern Ireland, who created a housing bubble that never existed. And then, of course, very quickly...
And similarly in Portugal.
You know, and then all that's really done is now we have many estates in Southern Ireland where literally no one lives, and they are just dilapidated now. So all that money that went into them has been wasted, for want of a better word. Yet there are lovely EU roads that run up to these lovely estates that don't exist anymore, which is quite funny, really.
And similarly in Spain.
You know, so it's about, really, for me, it's just about one country. It does feel almost like it's an economic war in some ways.
Yep.
And this economic war is literally about countries having sovereignty. If we go full in now, if that's what the British people want, and I respect people's decisions, if ultimately that's what...
Well, in the end, it seems to me that we can talk for or against Europe, but it is a referendum, so it's all about the people's decision.
It's all about the people's decision, but we have to bear in mind that even if, let's say, for those that want to stay in, the best scenario happens and we stay in.
Yes.
Is it the best scenario? Because honestly, the truth of it is...
Surely we can't ask that question once we've had the referendum. It has to be the best scenario then. This is where I'm coming in.
Okay.
So after the referendum...
So you're saying we've got to make it work the best way we can.
Whether we go in or whether we go out, my focus...
Yeah.
And I think, and this is really the point of this talk, in a sense, to get your ideas and to focus. We've got to make sure, literally at a local level, that everything's going to be working, whether we're in or out.
If we're in, then if we stay in, then the first thing we still have to do
is repair Europe. We still have to repair Brussels.
We have to try to work some very important questions out, and the first one is that we currently have an absolute wave. We have to then talk about the immigration issue at that point.
We have to talk about the immigration issue, whether we're in or out.
Whether we're in or out, but particularly if we're in, because it affects so many countries more than us.
Yep.
But you said to repair Europe, we have to think of it first. Remember, we're an island nation, so if we're thinking, okay, we're in.
We're an island nation, but we've always looked to the east. You know, the sick man of Europe and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And we know that what happens here is, to a certain extent, dictated by what happens on the continent. We cannot ignore.
We can't ignore it, but we then have to start thinking about every country is going to have to face the fact that what we've got to try to do is work some immediate plan in to stop the full immigration of every... Because some countries are literally just seeing a wave of their...
But there is no question that this debate, which is leading up to the referendum, you've already made a huge amount of noise, and I've already made a bit of noise, but you know, so much noise is going to be created in the next 4 months that Brussels is going to have to take control. Even if we go out, Brussels is still going to have to tidy up its home.
It is, and that's where I think, you know, that I would rather look at... I'd love to look at that scenario, but I do understand we have to face both. And
so the thing which is worrying me in a local area is, because I've got this local interest, is farmers. What do we do about them? Because we've got to...
We've got two problems.
If we're in or if we're out, what are we going to do?
Well, if we stay in, obviously they'll still receive their subsidies, but that's not the end of the farming problem.
It's not the farming problem. It's enormous because we've forced farmers to have these huge farms where they don't have proper security.
Yeah.
So we've really got to address the security issue, because I think simply giving somebody advice on how many gates they have is not sufficient. We've got to drastically increase our CCTV coverage. And possibly think of some more creative way policing the rural environment.
I think this is where modern techniques come in more, isn't it? When you're talking about
Increasingly.
livestock, it's going to have to be chips for all the animals.
Yeah. Well, I was brought up on a farm, so I know about it.
It's going to have to be. I do agree with what you're saying in terms of farms, because I think they've been really seriously have suffered over the last few years. We're asking more and more from them.
Well, we're
paying them less.
We're having a milking crisis as well. I mean, only today.
Yeah.
Not in this area, thank God.
Yeah, it's a serious concern for anybody involved in that industry, and also a lot of jobs.
But it also dictates the nature of our countryside. You know, our countryside has been created by these quite small farms. So having larger farms which only do one thing, this distorts the way our
yes, it does.
Our country is run and our country looks. You know, with both the EU and with farming, I think we draw a line and we say, right now, whatever we decide, we've got to look at the future, and we've got to say the future is the thing we've got to deal with. We as people who are interested in the local life of the area, we need to say. Local farmers, we've got to look after them.
We always say, don't we? We say shops are the lifeblood of a town, and then farms
and
are
farms are the lifeblood of the countryside.
You know, and there can't be any debate of that. So
none at all. But even the shops have been hampered by EU regulations.
The regulations are terrible for them. There's a tremendous amount of red tape. I would love to see that stripped away, obviously. But I mean, if we're talking about being in, this is another area where we talk about our own market town of Daventry. It's very difficult to set a business up in Daventry because you need a certain amount of money first off to get it off the ground. There's a tremendous amount of business rates that you have to pay. We don't see a lot of cottage industry starting up for exactly these reasons.
Well, maybe the business rates are one way that we can help people in the council.
Yeah,
we can soften the blow of the business rates to attract people into the area. We may be able to do something with that with farming. Particularly, I mean, if we go out, we've got this possible 2-year hiatus.
I think if we go out and we use our £55 million a day to ring fence farming, that's the reality.
I'm not completely sure that that's the way to go. But
I think we'd use a portion of it. I think we'd have to. I mean, you really would have to make sure that farmers lose nothing in terms of subsidy. I don't even think it needs all of that, but it would certainly.
I think we have to put farming right at the top of the agenda if there is an outvote. But I think the farming has to go at the top of the agenda, even if there's an in-vote. So we have to get it right.
I'm a great believer that one of the things that has to happen, whether you're in or whether you're out, the same question could be asked, which is simply this, is once you've decided, there should be a follow-up to this referendum, which is really simple, which is, obviously these are our priorities as a government, and I believe, and they should obviously reflect generally most people's priorities. So, for example, farming would affect a tremendous amount of rural people.
And fishing, actually.
NHS,
we don't have fishing here.
Exactly.
But the fishing industry has been pretty well destroyed.
If we looked at all of that, and you were able to put all those key categories down, then at least everybody, like a census, could actually say where they believe the priorities are. Once you've gathered all that data, then it's easy to prioritise the money. At the moment, what we have is the people that are elected make some quite serious decisions, which not everybody agrees with. In fact, a lot of people don't agree with it, and that is why we're in the mess we're in at the moment with politics. Which is that.
So, are you suggesting we have more referendums?
I'm actually suggesting we do. Yeah. I suggest we put it back. We could do it on a more local level quickly, but I think at the beginning we need to have clear priorities for every government going in. It's not about this is what we're going to do with the money. Give us your thoughts on how you would set up what the priorities are. What are the priorities for you?
But am I not right? Wendy Randall was calling for some sort of referenda a while ago. Nothing happened, and it sort of frittered away.
It's very difficult when you're in local politics on what I would call, we are the minority here in Daventry, because obviously it is a rural heartland, it is conservative through and through, and I fully understand
You're the minority.
I'm the minority, and I look like the minority. But
I'm not Sean.
But I know you're part
but
of the
you're a very nice minority, and we want you, of course.
But we do understand that, or I understand that the key is this is not. We have to either support the decisions that are made, or we keep fighting those decisions for political points. I would rather not fight for political points that have no meaning unless it was absolutely critical.
But the aim in local politics is surely to achieve something, and so, for example, the earlier this year, you and I and Amy went around to the pocket park in
Ashbyfields.
in Ashbyfields and in Drayton, and now something's happening.
A year later, the power of silence is a very powerful thing indeed.
And congratulations, tremendous.
It's small successes in local government because I'm doing these things because I know local people realise once you talk about them how important it is, and they realise what you say because sometimes they don't see it because you go past.
But it doesn't But I'm a demonstration. It doesn't just need to be a councillor who's doing it. It can be anybody. Joe Public, get involved.
A lot of people do, but I think what happens is that.
But a lot of people, what they're doing is sort of is just being negative. You've got to see, we need something doing. Let's get up and do it. Let's have a project.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts are very clear on why I believe to reinvigorate the park service. We could talk about
the park service. We could talk about this until the cows come in,
and
you know that I'm entirely behind you.
But the reason I think this is important when you talk about farming, for example, if you were to stay in the EU, is exactly that reason, because a lot of stress is on farmers. If everybody was taught the value of home-grown food
absolutely,
and recomposting and other things, I know Daventry is making.
And we don't have enough butchers. I mean, there's a butcher in Braunston who's gorgeous.
Yeah, but then you would take a tremendous
we don't have a butcher in. Oh, we do have a butcher in Daventry, don't we? We have two or three.
Yeah,
but we don't have a butcher in this area, Middlemore.
But you would then take a lot of stress off the farming community to be able to be more diverse with the way that they actually make their money, rather than, as you said, a lot of them are very large farms. They have to be focused in one direction,
and then their produce is just taken off. And
whereas
off
we could take that pressure away within a very short period of time. And people often think, well, how short a period of time? What are you talking about?
We need a flourishing farmers market locally, regularly.
3 or 4 years of education in schools, teaching the basics, can quickly turn into people actually growing food for themselves. And it would make a huge difference.
How many students come out of the schools and go into a farming education?
Very few, unless you're actually your family is already connected to it, I would have thought, which is the problem. So farming communities have been decimated because a lot of their family, I think this is another crisis, have gone off and done other things, and that's the last of the line. They've seen what it does to their father or their mother running the farm, and they realise how many hours have to go into.
But for example, here we could have chickens in the garden.
Well, there's no reason why not. And the other thing as well is my dad used to say this to me. He used to say, well, we always used to keep a goat in Ireland. He said, because that was the way we cut the grass down. And it sounds silly when you think back now, but of course it's logical. It's simple things where when you encourage these things into society as part of the norm, it doesn't turn it into a free-for-all. Not everybody's going to do it anyway, but you're encouraging children, you're encouraging people to try to do things that they hadn't done before. Because we've lost that little edge that doesn't exist now. And we'd have to think about this if we stay in the EU or even go out.
No, we stay in or whether we go out, we actually have to. We have to become more independent. We have to stop relying on somebody else to give us the directive.
Trades are very important.
Yeah, and we have to be conscious of our own local identity as well as the more national identity.
A great example of some of the schools, not locally. This is schools that I visited.
And actually, if you go to France. One of the things you find in France is that every little area has its local identity, which we're losing. How is it France is doing it right, and we're not?
We've lost the history of what we used to do. A good example is there's a school in London that's very traditional. It's called the Masonic School for Girls. It's where my brother is the headmaster of the primary school there. And they have a tradition for textiles, and this has grown up since the World War. They have some tunnels that run under the school, and the children used to have to go down there. And while they were there, they used to knit socks and various things for soldiers, sailors. And because of their affinity,
Sister Susie,
the Sister Susie song, and because their affinity with doing this for several key battleships, soldiers would write to the school, and those letters would be vetted and passed on to the children about what the soldiers did. Thank you for my socks, or something. But the school grew a reputation for textiling. Now they have famous people who do all the arts and crafts. The school still teaches it to this very day. We've lost. Only a few schools still have it. We spoke about before, some of the, like the Cambridges and Oxford, still have a tradition.
I was also in another school in Shoreditch or something, only about two or 3 weeks ago, and incredibly dynamic school. And the head teacher was saying to me, this form is out on is out doing a project outside, so you won't see them. And they said every form is out every day. There is one form out in the community, but I don't see that here in Daventry.
I think it's a lost trick. I mean, my experience is so far
because we could send children off to the farms.
If there's nothing more powerful than local. It should always start with children. I would love to see more kids getting out of the school on day trips locally, actually for them to find the issues and come up with ideas for tackling those issues. Because even if whatever they suggest wouldn't necessarily work, the point is they've highlighted an issue that we have completely missed. Because this is what happens: people drive past these wonderful parks of ours because it looks green and it looks like the grass is cut. You know, and I know, having gone there, they don't actually see the actual dangers and issues that lie there.
Destroyed all the,
you know,
all potential flowers.
You know, it's a tragedy, really. Yeah. So I think what we're really saying here is that whether you're in or out, there are a lot of things that have to start almost immediately.
And it's start now. And if we have to revive pride in our local area, whatever we do. And
if we continue on as we are, in the same vein that we currently are, then I'm afraid politically, every party, irrespective of your beliefs or non-beliefs or whatever, will continue to face the same problems that we're facing now in this country and across Europe, which is a disassociation with politics of a scale that I've never seen before.
Yep.
Parties which have lost identity. I think the Tories have still got an identity, but I would say, in all honesty, that you could be losing yours, because if you carry on as you are and you lose touch with the rural communities, we're talking about farming, then in 10 years or 15 you may have an identity crisis.
I have no intention of losing touch with that.
And that's good. But that's important. The same with us. If we lose, we have to morph, because we know our main agenda is gone.
Yes, but I'm afraid I think UKIP needs to think about what it's going to do after the referendum, because the referendum really is, you know.
Well, whatever happens, we have to, we have to morph and change.
You have to
change.
We have to change. Come on.
We have to change colour to something else.
Yeah, you may well have to change colour to something else, or move into even more local politics. But
I've thought of myself personally. I quite like the more local issues the parish councils have to offer personally, because I think you can make a difference there if you've got the right mindset for it, and I think it could, with the right person, it could bring it closer to the agenda of
what I would like to do as we come up to the referendum is make sure that we can avoid a squabble about migration, because I think it's an ugly, it's potentially ugly and nasty.
There's no need to go into that debate on migration, because, to be honest with you, really what the heart of the conversation really is about is, if you're leaving, it's about sovereignty. Do you want to create your own laws at home, and do you want to have your own a control method?
Well, you see, I would say yes, it's about sovereignty on the one hand, but it's also about dignity and local identity, and that's saying whether you're in or whether you're out.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter.
And
it matters, of course. It matters.
I think there's another area here which is also equally obvious. We're about to hit the baby boom complete generation now, where you're going to have more over 50s at any other point in history. And those people are starting to realise.
Isn't that why the regeneration scheme for the centre of Daventry with the old age housing project is so good?
Very important. Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing which we really should emphasise, that we've got this area with the retirement homes
across Europe. Particularly in the UK, I think we really haven't helped our older generation. We've really lost touch with them. They've got tremendous wisdom, great ideas.
The other thing in Daventry, of course, we need to make sure that our roads are built in such a way that you can actually trolley along on wheels, or actually walk along with a frame along the roads, because we don't want too much up and down.
That's maybe a fair point for the future.
We need to look at all. We need to look at things through the eyes of the people who are using the services that we've got.
Yes, I agree with that. Yeah, totally.
So whether we're in or out of Europe, I'm being very coy, aren't I?
Yeah, that's okay. That's fine.
Right. Whether we're in or out of Europe, we've got to make sure that we're prepared for the future afterwards.
It's going to be a different future.
Yeah.
Whatever the case may be, it's going to be massively different, because if we don't make these changes and we stay in, then I think, in all honesty, that we will end up with a very, very difficult period of history.
Well, if we don't make the changes and we stay in, then we could end up with people belly aching for yet another referendum in 10 years' time.
That won't happen. It might not happen, but unfortunately, like we just said, the problem is you can only be disassociated with politics for so long before the masses turn on your government, and this is where I get very worried.
Whether we're friends with Boris or not, whether we approve what he's doing or not, this is the one time we can make a difference, and we can shout loudly.
I think what's good is that there's a relatively open debate about it, which I think is good.
Well, I hope it remains open. I hope it remains friendly.
I think it should stay remote friendly, but what I would like to see is, I would like the campaign on fear to stop from the in campaigners, because let's be fair, and being in the minority, I know what it's like to be, shall we say, cast with a brush.
No. Well, there was a horrible thing about UKIP last year about hate not hope.
And we
wrong.
All that is so wrong on so many levels, because that's not what we're in it for. I came in it because I wanted to, and I've said this from day one, I wanted to see us get a referendum in Europe. Well, we get that. We've got that now. So I can't complain. I can't complain about that. No. We have an opportunity. If we don't stay in, well, I feel personally I did my bit. I tried my best to highlight the issues, and I stood on the right principles. But if we stay in, then I'm not a fool. I realise that we have to work with what we've got and make the best of it for everybody concerned in England. But that does mean there's still some very tough choices ahead.
I think despite the fact that I have some very great friends in Scotland, I think the Scottish resolution that we voted to keep the union and sort of tease, yes, but we may have another referendum, is wrong. We don't want to be in that position, and we don't want to allow people to push us into that position, whatever happens.
The problem with the SNP is simply that they're
a one party, a one principle.
They're led by a lady who doesn't speak for the whole of Scotland.
Yeah, but they're led by a lady who has more flair and more dynamism and is one of the best orators in the country.
Maybe, but
that's why she commands so much attention.
If she was clever, she would actually vote to leave, because that's how you get your referendum.
I know.
So there's no argument. She's really a great orator and really clever. I
also happen to think she's fairly honest. I don't agree with her views, but she's.
So I don't get why you would want to stay in that way. If you want independence, what do you actually want? That's the big question.
I think the first thing as a politician is you want to be trusted.
I think that's difficult, isn't it, in these day and age? I try my best to be as open and fair with everybody as possible. I know you do the same. But it's very difficult now, because we are also tarred, whether you're a local politician or a politician with a brush, that everybody's lying scumbag.
I was tarred the other day for having defected. And,
well, that's not right. Like all things in life, we all go off food. No disrespect to anybody. You're allowed to change your opinion and mind. And if you can't switch parties, then what does that say about the political system?
Well,
you're not allowed to change.
Winston Churchill did it.
He was one of the great liberals, wasn't he, at the beginning?
He really was. He really was.
So everybody is entitled to make changes, as long as when you make those changes, it's for the right reasons. That's very important. You won't find me flip-flopping from party to party just because it suits my agenda to do that. That's not something I do.
If you're genuinely looking at the parish council, you don't need to really worry too much about parties.
A perfect thing. It's lovely because it's neutral, and I kind of like that quite a lot.
Anyway, we have to stop.
Right.
Great stuff. Have we achieved anything?
Yeah, it's been an interesting debate. Very interesting debate.